Hey folks, today I thought we'd talk about the economics of one of these things, a bottle kid. Now this one's already eaten, it's just being whiny. And talk about different options for how to handle that from a business perspective. If you are raising goats or sheep, you're going to sometimes end up with, it's following me, end up with bottle lambs or bottle kids. And the the challenge with them is how do you actually work those out economically? And there are some different options. Let's start with kind of the most obvious one, and that is putting them on milk replacer, giving them a bottle. So if you put them on milk replacer, I have this handy dandy chart that I Martha Stewarted up, and I'm not going to explain. The left side of the chart is basically just the feeding schedule on a bag of Do More brand milk replacer. And the right side of the chart is working out how much does it actually cost to raise one kid to weaning given their feeding schedule. You can probably find cheaper milk replacer, more economical milk replacer. You can probably maybe not feed quite as much as it says, especially later on when you're getting close to weaning and stuff like that. But the number's probably not too far off, plus or minus like $10, maybe, maybe 20 on the high end. But either way, that's quite a bit of money to put into a kid. You get that kid up to weaning at 2 months. You'd be pretty fortunate if they average 30 pounds. The truth is that bottle kids and bottle lambs, now they tend to be a little sicklier, a little poorer doing. They don't gain as well. Maybe they didn't get mom's colostrum. Maybe they're just because they're in confined spaces and stuff, they have more problems with disease. There's a lot of reasons for that, but they just tend to not, they're not going to be the stars of the show typically on your operation. So you got to factor that in. And you're also going to have a higher death loss rate for those same reasons with your bottle kids. So even if we assume you have zero death loss rate and you wean a 30-pound kid. Now a 30-pound kid at peak market might bring $4 a pound, maybe a little higher, but let's just say $4 a pound for easy math. You end up at $120 is what you're going to gross, your gross product off of that kid if you sell it right off at weaning. You can keep it longer and feed it out, and that changes your math, of course. But we're looking at let's say $90 just to make it a nice even number. So you're only looking at netting $30 worth of profit off of that kid. And if you're bottling it by hand with a bottle, that's a pretty high labor input, actually. That's going to take a lot of time cleaning the bottles and mixing the stuff and bringing it out and doing that 2 to 3 to 4 times per day, depending on how old it is. That's a pretty high labor input. So from my perspective, if I can sell a bottle kid for at least about $40, $30, $40, I'm almost certainly money ahead, not even including my labor costs. Just looking at the cost of milk replacer. Now, there are alternative ways to make it more economical, especially from a labor cost perspective. If you look at large operations, people running, thousands of head of ewes or thousands of head of goats, one thing is just to not deal with bottle kids, and either they make it or they don't, and you don't pick them up. When I was growing up with the sheep, that's what we did for the commercial herd. You didn't pick up bummer lambs. You just didn't. And you'd be surprised, a lot of them, you didn't actually pick up as many dead as you might think. A lot of them figure out how to get along after a while, or they find their mom, or they get some other ewe to adopt them or something like that. Speaking of that, you can graft. Say you have a bottle kid like this. If I did have a doe that had a single and she had plenty of milk, I would seriously consider trying to graft this bottle kid onto that doe. A lot of different techniques for doing that. That would be a separate video. I'm not going to get into those. But grafting is a fancy word for get the doe to adopt the kid. On a similar topic, you can also use nursing animals. This is fairly common. We did this when I was growing up. We had purebred Romanoffs for a few years. And boy, if you don't know about those things are baby making machines. They average 3.5 lambs per ewe, and they can't quite raise 3.5 lambs per ewe. You either deal with a lot of death loss or you deal with a lot of bottle kids. Or bottle lambs, excuse me. And for a few years there, we used dairy goats as nurse animals, my dairy goats actually, as nurse animals. And a good dairy goat can raise 4 or more even of kids or lambs that aren't hers. You run them in, you put them in stanchion, you put some grain in front of them, you let the kids out, they go and nurse. And then when they're full, you bring them back in, maybe let another group out. They go and nurse until they're dried up, and you're just letting, it's equivalent of milking the dough and then putting it into a bottle, except you're just skipping the middleman. Just let the kids go straight for it. If I was to deal with a large number of bottle lambs or bottle kids, that would definitely be probably my pick of ways to do it, because in my opinion, it's the only system that scales very well. There are machines that can mix milk replacer and water together and kind of provide milk on demand for a group of bummer lambs or bummer kids. I haven't personally used those. I know people that have them. I know they will tell you, like, these machines are still fairly maintenance intensive. There's still a lot of work that goes into that. Still a lot less work than, mixing up bottles and everything. Speaking of bottles and big mixing systems, you can also use a bucket system. It's just a little bit easier than a bottle. I actually don't think it's all that much easier. You still have to do a lot of cleaning, and it's more difficult to clean, but it still has its advantages. Another alternative, and this is kind of my option of choice, is actually to sell the bummer kits, and I'll try to sell them. I'll ask a certain price, but, by that math, if I can get rid of that bummer kid for $30 or $40, I'm probably money ahead. Again, not factoring in the labor. One limitation there is, if I had 1,000 head of nannies and I was generating, let's say 50 or 100 bottle kids per year, that would flood the local market. And I would not be able to get even $30 or $40 for bummer kids anymore. I would have to figure something else out to do with them, or just accept taking a loss on them potentially. I definitely have seen, go down to Clay Center, Kansas in the springtime, sale barn there, they run like 5,000 head of goats through every sale. And if you go in the springtime, the first thing they'll sell is the bottle kids. And the last time I was down there in the springtime, I think they sold over 200 bottle kids, and some of them were going for a couple dollars per head. And they weren't particularly sickly looking or anything. They just, there was too many of them and nobody wanted them. So yeah, that's kind of the economics of bottle kids or bummer kids, some different options for how you can try to make it pencil out a little bit more favorably for you. I've told you what I do. Definitely what I do currently, as I scale up, at a certain point, it probably won't work anymore. I'll probably look at onboarding nursing animals. That is a whole thing unto itself. It's not as easy as I made it sound. You have to get them bred at the right time. You have to get them kidded out earlier. They need to be able to raise their own kids and then take over nursing for adopted kids. You also have the problem of if you have too much milk oversupply or not enough, you're still going to have to provide milk replacer and how you deal with that. So it's not a catch-all solution. If there's other solutions or ideas that you have or that you've tried, whether they worked or not, talk about them down in the comments. I want to hear about them.